Okay, so welcome back to another episode of The Full Global, where we dive deep into the art of building truly global companies. Today, we're joined by Andrew Bott, CEO of Enable, a company that's pioneering the rebate management software category, now used by manufacturers, distributors, and retailers globally. So, Andrew, with Enable growing more than 20x since 2020 and having raised over like 290 mil, right, from top tier investors. Your journey from dreaming about flying to transforming rebate management is really remarkable. So, can you tell us how did this adventure start for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my two passions in life have always been flying and, like you mentioned, and computing. And I don't know why, because my parents are into neither flying or computing. So it's a bit hard to understand. But I was able to combine those two things together when I met a flying school in the UK as a kid. I was just about a teenager, maybe, and went into this flying school that happened to be helicopters, just randomly, and got talking to the owners, and they kind of allowed me to go in at the weekend and help out with their computer systems. I built kind of systems to track all of their aircraft movements and customer logbooks and so on. And they very kindly gave me some helicopter training. So that was good of them. But most importantly, I was able to meet a lot of business people because, as you can imagine, learning to fly a helicopter and buying your own helicopter and flying it back to your own house, normally you would be quite a successful business person, which I was not because I was just a kid. But these people were hanging around. So that was really inspiring to me in terms of what could be achieved by building a successful business. And they also had placed some value on my technical skills. So I kind of built software for them, and eventually that led to meeting my co-founder, who was learning to fly, and that's how the whole thing with Enable came to be.
That's awesome. So, Andrew, now Enable is now an established company with thousands of clients across the globe, right? And we're gonna talk about that in a minute. But first, can you share that story of acquiring your very first client? How was that experience?
Sure. So I think for a long time, my experience was more of like a services business because it was about relationships that, I'd met these people. They thought got some skills to be able to build computer software, and I was building kind of web applications when that started to be a thing. So I was just, again, meeting people at the flying school, working for them. They were introducing me to their kind of contacts and other business people, and I was just building custom software. So that was really what I knew. And then eventually we identified some common themes and found rebate management as being a really big problem that a lot of people had, and that there was no modern competition. So we decided to kind of build a genuine product rather than just kind of bespoke services. And then that was a whole different business model, as you know, because it's no longer just meeting people and being referred in that way. It's actually trying to build a strategy around a product. So but I think, to answer your question, the very early customers we won because they needed rebate management, and we kind of just built our first system, and then started to get kind of recommendations and word of mouth from there.
That's awesome. And speaking of scaling, so with Enable achieving unicorn status, I guess, with this valuation over like a $1 billion. So looking back, what strategic initiatives from your perspective have been most effective in driving this I would say remarkable growth?
Sure. I mean, I think it wasn't that complicated, which doesn't mean it was easy, but it was quite simple in the fact that we first of all built these kind of handful of bespoke systems for a variety of companies. And you mentioned, buying groups, retailers, distributors, manufacturers, for example. So we, over the course of a few years, built a handful of bespoke systems for them. And then the next phase was seeing the common ground and turning it into a product and having a genuine product. So we're now talking, probably 2015, 2016, and then the next phase was kind of getting that product into a few companies and becoming successful with them. So that probably took 3 years to get our first, 20 or so customers onto the product. And then at that point, once we'd got those success stories and very happy customers, and we could see how big the problem and how big the market was, then it was about adding go-to-market kind of skills, and that required investment. So we kind of managed to raise the Series A, which was the hardest out of all of the rounds. We could talk more about that. That Series A gave us some fuel to start hiring on go-to-market. And we were very, very fortunate to find some amazingly skilled people who could set up and lead that go-to-market. And then the rest has really been as a result of just growth in taking that product into a lot of companies and getting them onboarded, getting them to success. And we've been through that cycle of raising capital, investing it in scaling the go-to-market, being successful there, and then raising more capital and then investing that. So it's been that kind of upward cycle.
And so was Enable operating at this point across 50 sectors globally in offices, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, in the UK, San Francisco, Toronto, Sydney, in Melbourne, right?
Yeah.
So what were the foundational steps you took to prepare for such expensive international growth, right? So what was that spot where you decided to go globally?
Well, I think initially, of course, I was born in the UK. I lived in the UK until 4 or 5 years ago. So we started the company in the UK, and we obviously had customers there, and all of our team was there. But quite early, we started to get inbound inquiries from the US in particular, and also Canada, and other places. But the US was a big source of inbound inquiries. So we were initially supporting those customers and winning them from the UK. But it became clear that was our biggest market, or it would be. And trying to do all that remotely and with the time zones and employing English people like me to try and do that was not the best. So we kind of knew if we were serious, we'd have to set up in the US. So I then came out, and it was just me initially. So it's just me in the US, no other employees. And then we brought over a couple of people as well, hired a small team. We proved that we could set up an operation in the US from that core team. And the next thing was, okay, San Francisco is a long way away from the UK and an 8-hour time difference. So we really need to, and it's also very expensive, and there's a big competition for talent. So we need to select a base in North America that would be high caliber, great people, some way between San Francisco and the UK, and also be a bit more cost effective. And having looked at many options, we selected Toronto. So that got us into Canada. And again, like the San Francisco setup, we set up with a very small team, just a few people. And then we were able to prove that out and just steadily grow it. And then the same with Sydney. So I think it's that having that methodology of being able to start with a very small, lean team in a new location and then scale and being able to replicate that kind of methodology.
Mm-hmm. And diving deeper into global expansion often brings unique challenges, especially navigating this diverse market dynamics, regulations, compliances, both from business perspective and hiring perspective, right? So reflecting on your journey, right, which has now seen it sort of around 10,000 companies worldwide. So what were some of the key obstacles you faced, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, I think early on, certainly massive cash constraints, of course. So we had, I'd say, what we did have was a really good understanding of the problem we were solving, a really good understanding of the market. Again, my co-founder, who I met through flying, he was in the distribution world. He owns still a very successful distributor. So we understood the market, and we had some really capable people to build the product and support and deliver that product. So that was very strong. We had a real shortage of funding because it was all bootstrapped. So that was a massive constraint. And then I think once we got the Series A, then things changed, because now we had no constraint on funding, but we did have a huge expectation to achieve hypergrowth, and COVID was just setting in. So that was when we were trying to hire our first people in the US. So that was quite challenging. And I think we've been fortunate because there isn't much competition for what we do. Also, there's a huge ROI associated with our product, so we can prove that if you spend $100, you'll get $500 back very quickly. So that helped. But I think more recent obstacles really are the rate of scale. That if you're adding say $100,000 a quarter, and then $1 million a quarter, and then 10 million a quarter, it clearly becomes a much bigger number and a much bigger challenge, and that requires a lot more people. So we've gone from, say, 50 people to 650 people, and now the average tenure of those people is quite low because we've been adding them quickly, and trying to manage and train and equip people is harder and harder. So I think now a lot of the challenges are, how do we hire the right people at scale, at pace? How do we equip them and enable them correctly and get them up to speed? How do we make sure we're looking after them and we keep people that are performing? So that those would be some of the obstacles now.
And speaking about your team, speaking about people, right? So according to LinkedIn, at this point you have around 700 members, right? And all your team is spread across multiple countries, right? So with such a distributed workforce, what is your philosophy and strategy behind hiring in different locations? Are you simply looking for the best talent available, or do you have a specific role country approach?
Sure. Yeah. So we were one of those traditional companies where everyone was in the office. That was how we started. And we really believed at that time having everyone working together, not necessarily 5 days a week, but certainly, 3 days a week, for example, led to great results and great collaboration and, working closely together and being focused and all those things. Now, like everyone else, when COVID hit, then everyone had to be remote. But even today, we still have kind of core locations. And so we've the one in the UK and the one in Canada, in Toronto, they are the two biggest. And of our entire team, probably 500 are in those two locations, and they go in, say, 3 days a week or something like that. And then San Francisco, Sydney, and more recently Melbourne. They're smaller, but still they are. We have offices. We pay for offices, and people go in. So that's been important. And we've also done it by role. So we think, for example, with account executives, certainly the larger and strategic account executives, then we want coverage. So we need people, say, across the US. And they won't go into an office because we just can't have that many offices. So that's fine. But for, say, BDRs and for engineers, we really think that's a more collaborative role. So we've organized kind of the working arrangements by role as well.
And keeping this large global team aligned with your core values and vision is, from my perspective, is a kind of big challenge, right? So, is your team is based in different locations, different cultures? So, how do you ensure that everyone remains connected to the heart of Enable's mission?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the things we did, which has been really valuable, is we implemented a methodology by the Table Group. And the Table Group is set up by Patrick Lencioni, who wrote The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. So quite a famous business book. And he also wrote one called The Advantage and some others. And in The Advantage, it sets out 6 clarifying questions on a company's purpose. And so, for example, we have, why do we exist? What do we do? How will we succeed? How do we behave? What's most important right now? Some of these are some of the questions. And we've spent a lot of time creating very simple, clear kind of statements to those things, and it gets cascaded around the whole company. We talk about it all the time, and at the end of the day, our purpose and our values and everything else are quite simple. It's really not complicated. So even though the business has complicated parts to it and whatever, but the overall kind of vision and values and purpose is not complicated. So I think that's a big part of it. And then having every possible meeting, whether it is on Zoom or whether it's face to face, kind of really going through as a team what these 6 questions are is really good to create that clarity.
Speaking about the future, right? So based on your insights and maybe Enable's trajectory, what trends do you see shaping the future of rebate management and maybe the technology sector in general?
Yeah. I mean, I guess they would be quite different things. So I think in terms of rebate management, that is a brand new category, and it wasn't really recognized until in the last probably 18 months. It was seen as being just something that happened in the finance teams of a few, distributors and a few industries and inside the four walls and not at all interesting. And what we've tried to do, and we've made some real progress, we just finished our third annual conference in Boston last week with all of our customers, is elevate rebate management into being a profession where it's a real strategic driver. And it's not just in finance, it's cross-functional. And it is also not just in the four walls of the company, but it's across the supply chain. It's all about trading relationships. And there's a huge ability to drive revenue and drive profit with effective rebate management. So that's massively, massively changing. And we're still right at the beginning of that. I would say about 80% of the global economy is impacted by rebates, and we're changing the impact, but we've probably only done, say, 1% of it so far. So we're just at the beginning. There'll be massive change to come. And then I guess technology in general would be a different topic, but we could talk about that as well.
Okay. So probably my last question, I guess, what advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs looking to take their companies global, right? Based maybe on your journey.
Sure. So I think one thing is to try and look at common ground. So, for example, we started in the UK, but we didn't kind of really penetrate Europe early on because we saw that the US and Canada and Australia, speak English, and the culture in some ways is more similar to the UK than some other countries that are closer to home. So look at that. Certainly look at where customer demand is, of course, and that's so important for us. We're really following our customers and trying to be in markets where our customers are. I think starting small, so don't just open a huge operation in a foreign country. I think starting small and making sure you've got very strong people that can run the initial base. So I had another co-founder who is also our COO, and he's extremely strong. And also we hired a CFO before I left the UK. And I think without those two, and maybe some others, but certainly without that core leadership team, I couldn't have possibly just left the team behind. So I think having that strong team in place. But also I'd say really kind of go for it, because I was given books that were this big on what you have to do to set up in another country. And reality is it wasn't. I don't think it was that hard. I think having good people, having good advisors like lawyers, for example, a good team is essential. But it's really not that difficult to open up in a new country. It's certainly my experience.
Got it. Andrew, it's been an absolute privilege to delve into the world of Enable with you, uncovering the strategies and philosophies that have led your company to this massive global success. I guess your insights are gold for anyone looking to scale their businesses. So, thank you so much for taking the time.
Sure, it's very kind of you. I feel like we're still getting started here, so I appreciate your kind words. And certainly, we've grown a lot and we've achieved a lot, but we're still figuring it out. And there's a huge amount to do. We're just getting started here.
Awesome. Okay.